All right. So this PowerPoint is going to be on the immune system. This is Unit 6. This is going to span 2 weeks. So we're going to do just an overview of the immune system today. And then next week, we'll focus more on the coronavirus, which I think will be interesting. And after learning about how the immune system works, it will hopefully make a little bit more sense. You'll sort of understand a little bit more about what's actually happening with this virus. In the meantime, we're also going to do an activity related to Ebola and the Ebola outbreak that occurred a couple of years ago, so that you can sort of see how scientists track an outbreak and sort of understand how it spreads. So I'm going to link this PowerPoint up on Canvas, and you'll see a lot of these are hyperlinked. These are videos, so you can go through and watch these videos. I think they'll be helpful to you in sort of understanding this and seeing visuals of it, but I just tried to record this a minute ago and it didn't work with any of the videos. So I'll let you watch them on your own. I'll go through the PowerPoint. You go back through and watch the videos, and I think you'll have a better understanding of what we're talking about here. So first of all, what is the immune system? The immune system is awesome. Anything that could get into our body that our body recognizes as a foreign particle. So whether it's a germ, a pathogen, a virus, a bacteria, pollen, dust, our body senses it as a foreign particle and launches this full-fledged attack on it, and basically keeps us really healthy for the most part. If we didn't have this immune system, we would be in big trouble pretty much all the time, because we're coming in contact with germs, pathogens, viruses, bacteria all the time. So the immune system is our body's defense against disease-causing organisms, malfunctioning cells, so those would be like tumor cells or cancerous cells, and foreign particles that sometimes actually aren't harmful for us, but our body launches the attack anyway, which we know as allergies, which we'll get to at the end of this PowerPoint. We're going to talk about the immune system as 3 different lines of defense. Yep. What? All right. Sorry. Kids are still home. All right. First line of defense. This is basically our body's non-specific way of keeping harmful things out of our body. It doesn't care what the harmful thing is. It just doesn't want it to enter. So first line of defense is the body just trying to keep things out. The skin is a great layer of defense. So our skin, this is a microscopic image of our skin. Looks kind of gross, but our skin's basically made up of these scale-like cells. They're waterproof. They're full of something called keratin, and they form this really tight layer that keeps potential invaders out. There are also chemicals secreted on the skin that help in this, and you know that if you have a cut on your skin, it's more likely to get infected than if you don't. That's because that first line of defense is breached. Bacteria or viruses can get in. And our skin's constantly regenerating, so we're regenerating this layer of defense. But there are areas of the body that don't have skin, like the mouth and the nose. So what do those areas do? Well, in the mouth and the nose, we create what we call mucus, which if you've ever had allergies or a cold, you know well. You might think, you get a cold, you get really stuffy, you cough a lot, that's not good. That's actually your body's first line of defense, trying to get these particles out, trying to keep you healthy. So basically, as you breathe in foreign particles that are just in the air, if there's bacteria or viruses in them, they'll bump into the mucus throughout the respiratory system. They get stuck. And the hair-like structures, this right here is cilia, they basically trap that mucus with the particles in it and either cough it up or swallow it down into the stomach. 2 ways to get the bacteria away from the lungs, which is really the idea. Now, you might think, well, if you swallow bacteria, don't we have a problem here? Isn't it now inside of our bodies? Well, not necessarily. First of all, you're swallowing it with saliva. And first thing you do when you cut your finger, you usually put it right in your mouth. not going to do it today because we're not supposed to do that. Keep our hands away from our face. But you do. Typically, if you get a paper cut, your natural instinct is to suck on your finger. Saliva actually has really great enzymes in them that help to break down bacteria. If you ever notice, if you get a cut inside your mouth, there are a couple reasons for this, but they typically heal pretty quickly. And one of those reasons is because the saliva helps to aid in the healing of those cuts. It's also because the skin there is different, or it's not really. It's like a mucous membrane instead of the cutaneous membrane of the skin. But there are lots of bacteria that survive these chemicals in the saliva, and instead of dying in the mouth, they get swallowed. So like we asked before, what happens? Wouldn't that mean that that bacteria is now inside the body? Well, a couple things. One, we have stomach acid. Stomach acid helps us digest our food, also actually helps kill bacteria. So when you swallow it, most of that bacteria can't really survive the stomach acid. So we could still consider this first line of defense. We don't care what the bacteria is, we just don't want it to enter our bodies. And remember when we talked about the digestive system, we talked about it as our body being represented by this plastic tube, where the outside of the tube is the skin, the inside of the tube is the digestive tract. So that would be like the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the intestines. And when we talked about how when food's digested within the hole in the tube, it never actually enters the solid plastic part right here. It never actually enters the body. That's still not considered inside the body. And inside this tube, we actually have a lot of bacteria. We have more bacteria on our body than we actually do human cells, like a lot more. And the bacteria inside this, like the bacteria in your gut, in your digestive tract, is actually really important. It's important to help you digest your food. It keeps you healthy. So not all bacteria is bad. The problem is if this bacteria in here gets in here, into your actual body. That's where we don't want it. So E. coli is common in all of our digestive tracts, but we know of E. coli as making us really sick. It's when that E. coli gets into places that it's not supposed to that it causes problems. Only if E. coli is introduced in an unnatural manner can they break through the first line of defense and harm us. All right, so that's the first line of defense. So we have the skin, we have mucus, cilia, saliva, stomach acid. All of those are meant to keep harmful substances out of our body. They're non-specific. They don't care what the harmful substance is. We just want to keep it out. Second line of defense occurs if that bacteria that the first line of defense tries to keep out makes its way through. So lots of times, these foreign particles do make it into our system. So then what happens? Then our body launches its second line of defense. And this is primarily made up of, and again, this is another link that you can watch. This is primarily made up of white blood cells. So we talked about white blood cells when we did the cardiovascular system. But if these invaders, these pathogens, these germs, viruses, bacteria actually make their way inside of our body, the white blood cells launch into action. There are lots of different types of white blood cells. You don't need to know all the different terms and all their different functions. But typically white blood cells circulate throughout the body in the blood. But if there's an infection, then these white blood cells sort of seep out of the blood and into the body tissue where they start eating whatever invader they find. And white blood cells are known as phagocytes. So phagocytes are basically, they eat cells or they eat bacteria. They'll eat these foreign invaders. Once they eat them, they typically die. And then they're digested in those organelles called lysosomes that we talked about. And if you ever see pus in an infected area, that pus is actually those white blood cells that have digested that bacteria and are trying to rid the body of the bacteria. So lysosomes are really helpful, or sorry, not lysosomes. White blood cells are really helpful in our second line of defense. And they're really good at eating bacteria, digesting bacteria, getting rid of bacteria. But viruses are a little bit different than bacteria. We're hearing a lot about viruses these days. This is a very timely lesson. But viruses are sort of scary with the way they work. Bacteria gets in. If it's a bacterial infection, we can take an antibiotic. That antibiotic kills the bacteria pretty quickly. We heal pretty quickly. If it's a virus, we can't take an antibiotic. So we have to rely on our body's defense mechanisms to get rid of this virus. But before that can happen, these viruses have this weird ability to actually hijack cells. So viruses aren't alive. Bacteria are alive. Viruses aren't alive. So they need living cells in order to function. So viruses can't live outside of a host for very long. Maybe a couple of days. You're actually seeing a lot of timelines on how long this coronavirus can last on surfaces. But in order for them to really multiply and function well, they need a host. So viruses enter the body. So let's say you breathe in, somebody has a virus, their particles enter the air. And if you watch this video, you can see it really well. Their particles enter the air. You breathe those particles in. They enter your system and they attach to a cell. So coronavirus attaches to a cell in the lungs. There's a protein on the surface of the cell that it recognizes, and it attaches and it injects that cell with its DNA or RNA. And then it uses the cell to start making lots and lots and lots of copies of that DNA and RNA. And our cells basically turn into virus making factories. So they make all the different parts of the virus, they reassemble these viruses, and it's like this virus army starts forming. Thousands of viruses start forming, hundreds of thousands of viruses inside one single cell. And when those viruses multiply enough, that cell will burst, and all of those viruses will sort of be released into the body and able to infect other cells. So you can see here, this is a picture of a cell before it gets infected with a virus. And this is the cell after it was infected with a virus. And all of these little particles inside are viruses that hijacked cell has made. This cell will burst, and all of these little viruses will be able to go infect other cells. So this is what one type of virus looks like. This is not what coronavirus looks like, but this is one type of virus. Lots of viruses have different structures, but you'll do an activity where you'll see a bunch of the different structures. But part of...
Where is that?
This is, I'm doing a lesson. Can you give me 1 second? I'll be out in a minute, okay?
Are you watching the
Yep.
commercial?
Yeah, I'm watching a commercial. Yep. All right. Go see Daddy. Bye-bye. Sorry about that.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So
Bye-bye, Daddy.
once
Bye-bye,
a virus
Daddy.
infects a body cell, that body cell, part of the second line of defense, that body cell will release a chemical called interferon. And interferon is a chemical that interferes with the ability of viruses to attack other body cells. So a cell knows that it's infected. It releases this chemical and basically prevents other cells from being attacked by that virus. So interferon is a chemical. It's part of our second line of defense. What happens to those cells that are already infected? There are other white blood cells called T cells. This is still our second line of defense. These T cells are natural killer cells. So while they go around and kill foreign invaders, they also detect our own body cells that were infected, and they kill those too. They find these infected cells, they quickly kill them, and then go search for other cells that might be infected, basically to prevent these virus machines from working. So second line of defense, we've got the white blood cells, the phagocytes that eat the bacteria. We have interferon, which is a chemical that prevents viruses from attacking other body cells, and T cells, which are our natural killer cells that go out and basically fight on the front lines, the cells that were infected, kill the cells that were infected, and also kill other cancer cells or other foreign particles as well. All right, again, with the second line of defense is the inflammatory response. So the inflammatory response, anytime you get some sort of infection, oftentimes it will swell up. That inflammatory response, the inflammation, does a couple things. First of all, whenever a body cell is injured, it releases a chemical called a histamine. Histamine basically causes blood to rush to the area, which begins the inflammatory response. So it dilates the blood vessels, it makes them bigger, causes blood to rush to the area, which also causes those white blood cells to rush to the area. So capillaries dilate, pyrogens are released, which reach the hypothalamus, your temperature increases, so you get a fever. Basically helps things happen faster in the body. Sorry. I don't know if you can see this or not. You start to sense pain. Your white blood cells flock to the infected area like sharks to blood. So this inflammatory response, inflammation, is actually a bunch of different things happening to cause these our body's defenses to rush to the area to slow the invasion of this foreign particle. So that is the second line of defense. And second line of defense is usually pretty good at stopping these infections. But we divide the immune system up into two divisions. The first one that we just talked about is the cell-mediated immune system. So the white blood cells, the phagocytes, the T cells, these basically stop the infection that's currently happening. It's our protective factor in our living cells. The phagocytes eat the invaders, the T cells kill the invaders. It's when a current invasion is happening. That's the cell-mediated immune response. But there's another response that happens, another division, that's called the antibody-mediated immunity. And it's controlled by antibodies. We're going to talk about antibodies in a minute. And this is where the third line of defense comes in. I'm going to walk for a second so that I can plug my computer in. Actually, I should be okay. Hopefully, I'll go through this fast. All right, third line of defense, antibodies. Antibodies are produced by our bodies, and they are, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to do one more short presentation on antibodies. So I'm going to stop this here. Just look for the video on antibodies starting soon. Sorry about the long video. I'm allowed to upload longer videos now. But I'll get to the third line of defense in the next video, and then my computer won't die. All right, hope that was helpful.